Alright mate, how you doing? In today's video it's time for me to react to my Premier League predictions from the start of the 2016-17 season. A lot of you have been asking me to do this and as usual I had a few shockers in there. Maybe not as bad as last year where I predicted Leicester to finish 17th when they won the league. But yeah, I got a few wrong, but I got a few right as well. So let's take a look at them and react to my Premier League predictions. Okay, let's start off by taking a look at who I thought was going to get relegated this season. So these are the three teams I'm predicting to get relegated this season. There's only one team in here that I'm really confident will go down. The other two is a bit of a gamble. But Hull City, I think, are going to finish bottom of the league and go straight back down again. I'm going to go with West Brom, Burnley and Hull to be relegated. Okay, so straight away, you can see I got one right. And I said Hull were going to go down, and they did go down. And I also said Hull were the only team I was confident would definitely go down. I said they'd finish bottom. They didn't finish bottom, to be fair. They actually had a really good start to the season. Then it went off the rails a little bit. Then they got the new manager in, picked things up, but it wasn't enough. They finished 18th. They went down. However, Burnley stayed up. They did quite well this year. So I got that one wrong for sure. And West Brom was probably the biggest error I made in this year's Premier League predictions. I don't know why I predicted West Brom to finish 18th. They actually finished 10th. They could have finished higher in the end. I should have remembered that Tony Pulis is an absolute don when it comes to Premier League management. He doesn't take teams down. So I'm not sure what I was thinking with that one, to be honest. But I definitely got that one wrong. Now, if we take a look at the few spots above the relegation zone, you'll see that I wasn't far off with the other two relegated teams, Middlesbrough and Sunderland. Bournemouth had an impressive debut season in the Premier League under the young manager Eddie Howe. I think they're going to stay up again. I think they're going to be safe, but I think they're going to find it a little bit harder second time around. Okay, so if we look at my predictions from 17th to 11th place, there's only a couple that stand out as bad predictions. They're the two South Coast teams, Bournemouth and Southampton. I thought Bournemouth were going to have a second season syndrome and struggle in the league a little bit more than they did in the first time out, but they actually did better. They actually did really well. They finished 9th, which is unbelievable, and it just adds to the already growing opinion that Eddie Howe is a quality manager and needs to be snapped up by another club soon. So Bournemouth fans, sorry about that. I got that well wrong. Your team, I don't actually think is unbelievable. I don't think you've got any standout great players. I just think you're a really well-oiled unit, and a lot of credit's got to go to the manager for that. As for Southampton, they're repeatedly selling players every summer, but they don't seem to be struggling with it too bad. They had a really solid season. I predicted them to finish 12th. They finished 8th, not miles away from my prediction, but the two South Coast teams are the ones that I did a bit badly on. The rest of those teams that I had in that bottom half more or less finished in and around the spots I predicted them to. Middlesbrough and Sunderland obviously got relegated. I predicted them to stay up, but they weren't far away from the relegation zone in my prediction. Watford, Swansea, Crystal Palace all didn't have amazing seasons if you look at the season as a whole, and I was right to have them lower down. Palace could have easily finished 11th. The form they were on when they actually got themselves survival, it looked like they would, but as soon as they got survival, they kind of stopped performing again. So they finished 14th. But I'm pretty happy with my bottom half predictions. The main exception probably being West Brom and the South Coast teams. But everyone else, I don't think I did too bad. In 10th place, I'm going with Stoke. They've got a decent squad. They had one last year as well. I think they're going to continue to do well under Mark Hughes. In 9th place, I've gone with my boys, West Ham United. We've been one of the most active clubs in the transfer window this summer. Okay, so in 10th place, I predicted Stoke. I thought West Ham would finish 9th. I thought Everton would finish 8th. Leicester would finish 7th. So again, in general, I don't think these are too bad. Leicester's the one that stands out. They obviously struggled a lot towards the start of the season. They ended up sacking Ranieri, which I made a whole different IMO video about. I wasn't happy about it, and my kind of football purist, emotional side football fan didn't like that decision at all. But if you look at the stats and you look at the numbers, their decision to get rid of Ranieri has been vindicated because they stayed up. They actually did quite well in the Champions League. Shakespeare's proven that he probably played a big part in their success in the Premier League the season before as well. But they still didn't finish anywhere near 7th, really. They finished 12th. There was quite a few points between them and 7th place. So hold my hands up to getting that one wrong. I knew they'd struggle compared to finishing 1st the year before. I knew that was never going to happen again. I thought playing in the Champions League would hinder them. Probably didn't expect it would hinder them as much as it did. So 7th to 12th, yeah, not great. But the rest are actually quite close. I had Stoke to finish 10th. They actually finished 13th, but there's only 1 point between them and 10th. So that could have easily happened. I'm really happy with that prediction. Also, with West Ham, I had us to finish 9th. I knew we wouldn't have as good a year as we did last year with the new stadium and whatnot. We actually finished 11th, but we were 1 point off 9th. It's actually amazing that we ended up finishing 11th if you really think about it, considering how bad we were. And we were looking like relegation candidates around Christmas time. But we really got some wins. Bilic has had a lot of critics this year. The transfer window didn't end up being as good as I thought it had been. Like, I thought talked to people like, are you? We're going to hit the ground running. He ended up getting injured for ages. I thought Caleri on paper looked like he could be good, top goal scorer in the Copa Libertadores. He comes to the Premier League, he's forgot how to shoot. Feghouli, again, another player on paper who looked decent, an Algerian international, Valencia player. He comes and towards the end of the season, he started delivering. He scored on the final day, but he hasn't really been the player we thought he would be. And of course, we lost Dimitri Payet, and it ended up that he was a negative influence when he was at the club. So getting rid of him is actually when our form picked up. But yeah, I'm actually happy with us finishing 11th, to be honest. I think that it's all we can really expect. If you'd offered me at the start of the season, us being safe from relegation and us finishing above the reigning champions, I'll take it. It's actually 2 seasons in a row we finished above the reigning champions. We finished above Chelsea last year and above Leicester this year. I know that you non-West Ham fans and you cynics are going to be saying, oh, you're trying to find a silver lining, are you? Like, no, I'm not saying it's a great season for us, but it's all about expectation levels. Yeah, I know I might criticise some of the top clubs when they don't do what they should, but they're still finishing above us. But you can't compare them to West Ham. You have to look at the club you support and what they should be doing based on the money they've got, the fans they've got, the levels they usually hit. Right now, West Ham finishing 11th is probably about par, guys. That's all we really are. Like, I'd love us to get in and around the European spots, but we haven't really proven that we can do that every year yet. Everton I predicted to finish 8th. They actually finished 7th, so I was only 1 spot off. Now, the points between 7th and 8th were actually quite a lot. There was 15 points between 7th place and 8th place, so quite a big gap, but only 1 place off isn't a bad prediction if you ask me. So up to this point, I'd say my predictions have been okay. Like, not amazing, but I'm not really unhappy with them. But between 20th and 7th place, one thing that does concern me is I haven't got a single team exactly right yet. Not one of those teams finished exactly where I thought they would. So let's move on to the top 6. I'm going to take a look at 6th and 5th place. Who have I predicted to miss out on the top 4? Let's have a look. Yes, I'm going with the 2 North London clubs. I think Spurs and Arsenal aren't going to make it in the top 4. Okay, we have 2 very different predictions here. One which is way off, one which is bang on. Okay, so I predicted Tottenham to finish 6th, which ended up being a terrible prediction. They finished 2nd and they were the closest team to challenging Chelsea for the title. So hold my hands up. I think part of my reason for that was thinking they were going to struggle with Champions League competition. They ended up getting knocked out in the group stage, so it didn't really interfere with them that much. Obviously, Europa League kicked in for them after that, but they managed to compete on a lot of fronts, to be fair. And Pochettino impressed me again. You know, their squad, I love the English core to their squad, the Walkers, the Roses, you know, the Dele Allis, the Harry Kanes, Christian Eriksen, Son. What a season Son has had. Unbelievable. Toby Alderweireld, Vertonghen's been really good. Everyone's been good for Spurs, really. They've just been really solid. Perhaps because they haven't been up there, like in 2nd place, challenging for the title that many times in their history, I didn't know if they'd do it 2 years back to back, but I think they've got a really good core now. And if they can keep Pochettino and that base of players, I expect them to be up there again next year, but I'll save that for next season's Premier League predictions video. If we move on to 5th place, it's the first one I got exactly right. I predicted Arsenal to miss out on the top 4, and I was right. And I am going to give myself some credit for this one, because I put my neck on the line predicting Arsenal, a team that has traditionally never missed out on top 4 under Arsene Wenger's management, to not get top 4 was a big claim, and I got a lot of stick from Arsenal fans for it, but I felt they weren't going to do it. I didn't feel like they'd progressed enough. Since they signed the likes of Ozil and Sanchez, they haven't kept bringing that quality of player into the club. They haven't shown the ambition. You know, I predicted this before they went and signed Mustafi and Lucas Perez. Lucas Perez didn't end up getting the game time he probably should have. He did well in the cup competitions. Mustafi made a big difference, but obviously not a bigger difference enough. And right now, Arsenal are in a really bad position in my eyes. I think Wenger, and not just Wenger, but the management, you know, the ownership have to go. You know, Stan Kroenke is not the right person to take Arsenal to where Arsenal fans want to see them go. And I think it's impossible, no matter how much the players respect Wenger, it's impossible for them not to start doubting him when they're seeing all the negative press, all the Wenger out signs, all the Arsenal fan TV stuff, which we know they watch. It's impossible not to lose faith in your manager when this stuff is happening. It's becoming a circus and it has to be ended. Wenger is not bigger than the club. What will happen next year? They're not going to win the Champions League. They can't use that excuse. But they are going to win the Europa League. Maybe that's their best bet of actually winning European competition. You know, they usually get through their group in the Champions League and then get knocked out, so they don't drop into the Europa League. So it'd be interesting to see how they get on in there. What Wenger's been trying to do in order to kind of deflect blame away from him and get the attention off their missing out on Champions League and also finishing below Tottenham for the first time in a long time is sort of saying, yeah, but we've done it for 20 years. We're allowed one blip every now and then. Maybe that's true, and Wenger does deserve credit for how consistent he's been over those years, but has he been consistently succeeding his expectations, or has he been consistently hitting par and now he's finally dropped below par? That's what I think. I think your objectives as Arsenal manager is to get top 4 minimum. And now he hasn't done it. Does his job now become in doubt? The fact is, what will happen next year? That's the big question, because is it 1 year blip like Wenger's trying to make it sound, or is it the start of a slow downward spiral for Arsenal? Because there's a lot of competition in the Premier League now. That remains to be seen. I think Wenger is going to stay, which will be, I think, a mistake. And I don't think they're going to win the FA Cup either. You know, Koscielny's banned. Chelsea look dangerous. So if he does miss out on the FA Cup and top 4, how can you keep him in the job? I don't know, but we'll move on. I got that one right though, and I'm happy with that. Let's take a look at my top 4 predictions. So, you may be surprised by this, but I've got Liverpool finishing in 4th place. I think they're going to get in the top 4 this season, mainly because they're not competing in European football. That is going to be a massive relief for their fixture schedule. Last time they weren't competing in European football, they nearly won the league under Brendan Rodgers when they had Luis Suarez. They finished 2nd. Okay, so that's another one, 2 in a row in fact, that I've got dead right. I predicted Liverpool to finish 4th, and they did finish 4th. At the start of the season, they were very much in the title race. They didn't have European competition to slow them down and take their eye off the ball, and that clearly showed, but they did go off the boil. I think Mane going to the African Cup of Nations had a really bad effect on their team, because Mane's been unbelievable for them. So they ended up not quite going for the title, but 4th place for Liverpool is great. It shows signs of progression back in the Champions League. I have to say, predicting this top 6 was really hard this year, because you had Chelsea with a new manager, obviously always got money to spend. You had Man City with a new manager, Man United with a new manager. You had Liverpool with Klopp's first season after having a transfer window, you know, to settle in and put his stamp on the squad. You had a lot of different things. You had Tottenham on form, Arsenal falling off form maybe. Finding the right spots was never going to be easy. And I'm actually happy that I got Arsenal and Liverpool completely correct. Who did I predict to finish 3rd though? The top 3 was really, really hard to choose, guys, but in 3rd, I'm going with Chelsea. Just like Liverpool, Chelsea have got no European football to distract them. Okay, so I went with Chelsea in 3rd. Now, obviously, last year they did really bad. You know, saw Mourinho get sacked. They dropped right down out of European football completely. And I felt that they definitely weren't going to have a season like that again. That wasn't like a really brave prediction. It was obvious Chelsea were going to do better under Conte. I went with 3rd. Why did I go with 3rd? Because I thought that they were going to take a bit longer than they did to settle in under a new manager. And if you look at the first few games of the season, they weren't amazing. But it was only when they switched to that 5 at the back that Conte, you know, made his own in Italy. They really started to run away with the league. So obviously they finished 1st. I predicted 3rd. You like to try and get who wins the league right. Shows a little bit of a decent prediction. I obviously didn't do it last year and I had Leicester finishing 17th. This one I was a lot closer, only 2 spots off. But yeah, I thought Chelsea were going to get 3rd, and they just impressed me this year. They did a lot better. They gelled as a team under a new manager so quick. And I think they had a point to prove after the year before. People like Eden Hazard, who was player of the year, and then the year after that went off the boil completely when Leicester won. He came back this year, and I think he was definitely not himself under Mourinho for that first part of last season. And Conte's managed to find, you know, his form again. And Chelsea looked dangerous, and I think they definitely could be a contender for title winning again next season. But again, I'll save that for the next Premier League predictions video. Who did I have finishing 2nd and 1st? In 2nd place, I've got Manchester City. This was so hard to choose, guys. There's so many factors, but I think Manchester United are going to win the league over Man City. Here's why. Okay, so I went with Manchester City to finish in 2nd place. Now, this is only one place out. They finished 3rd in the end. What I got right is I accurately predicted they wouldn't win the league under Pep Guardiola, which is a fairly brave decision when you consider that Pep Guardiola tends to win the league whoever he manages, but I knew this was going to be a bigger challenge for him. He had a lot more competition than he's ever had in La Liga or the Bundesliga, and it was too much for him. Should they have finished top 2? Maybe, with the squad they had, but they didn't, and they just finished underneath that in 3rd. But I got them right in terms of getting a Champions League spot, and if you watch the season this year, you know how it unfolded. The Champions League spots were constantly changing up and down, so it really could have gone any way between a number of clubs. But I'm happy with my City prediction only being 1 wrong. Obviously, though, this only leaves 1 team left. So I went with Manchester United to win the league under a new manager in Jose Mourinho, but not someone that was new to the Premier League like Conte or like Pep. And I felt like even though they didn't buy loads of players in the summer, they bought well with the likes of Pogba, Mkhitaryan. You know, I thought Mkhitaryan would come into the team sooner than he did, but Jose decided to kind of do that little thing he does where he kind of puts them in the naughty spot for a little bit, gets them hungry again, then brings them back in. He did it with Martial as well a little bit. So they didn't necessarily feel the full force of those new signings straight away. Pogba took a little bit of time to get going. One person that didn't though was Zlatan. Zlatan came in and just reminded us how good this guy is. What a class act, by the way, to score the goals in the most competitive league in the world at his age. Fair play, Zlatan. What a player. But ultimately, they finished 6th, which is really poor, really, from my prediction perspective, but also from Manchester United's expectations. The only way they can really salvage this season, in my opinion, is by winning the Europa League. So if they do win the Europa League, they get back into the Champions League. And at that point, you could probably say they hit expectations. And because I think that's probably what the board asked Jose, is to get a Champions League spot. And when you compare that to Arsenal, even though Arsenal finished above Man United, you have to say, even if they do win the FA Cup, they've done worse than Man United if Man U win the Europa League, because they're in the Champions League and Arsenal aren't. But I do have to hold my hands up and say I got this prediction wrong. I believed that Jose could turn Manchester United into a team that was hard to beat, and he did do that. They went a large part of the season unbeaten. However, they kept drawing too many games. It was amazing during that unbeaten run they had. They just weren't climbing up the table. They were just staying where they were. So if he can build on that next year, keep making them very hard to beat, just get them a few more goals going forward, find that attacking flair of old Manchester United times, then they could be a danger. They probably need 1 or 2 additions still, but they're not far off being a title challenging team in my opinion. So in total, looking at my predictions, I would say I did okay. I'd give myself probably a B- or a C+. I don't think I got anything like terribly wrong in the way that I got Leicester so wrong last year. West Brom stands out as one I didn't do well on, and probably Manchester United are the two that really shout out at me as where I just didn't see what was going to happen with them this season. But getting Arsenal and Liverpool completely correct in the most competitive part of the league table, I'm really happy with. I'm sure you guys in the comments are going to say otherwise and say that I had a shocker in my predictions. I'm never going to get all 20 right, guys. If I could get all 20 right, I would make a lot of money in the bookies, right? That's not going to happen. But what I can do is get a general feel for the league. Of course, I could have done better. I'm hoping next year I will do better. But overall, I'll give myself a B- or a C+. Let me know in the comments below what grade you would give me for my predictions for the 2016-17 season. And leave your predictions for the 17-18 season down below. I'll make my video in a few months once some transfers have been done. I think there's going to be some big moves happening this summer. We could see Diego Costa leave Chelsea. We could see Sanchez or maybe even Ozil leave Arsenal. We could see some new players coming into Liverpool, Man City. All these teams are going to have big budgets, and they're going to change the landscape of the Premier League for next season for sure. That's why I'll wait till the last possible moment before the Premier League begins to make my next season's predictions. But drop a like on this video if you've enjoyed it. Subscribe for more. We've got lots of content going up on the channel right now, so make sure you've checked it all out. And I'll see you when you're older. Until then, don't go changing. Bye-bye.